What's up?
Not much. How are you?
Well, I'm really excited to dive in and chat with you today, and even more interesting now. I'm even more intrigued now. Understanding the concept as a human being, you're not a damn tree. You can move and live wherever you choose to live, and so Jess, I appreciate you carving out the time, jumping in here, hanging out with us, and I would love for you to give just a little context, give a little background, share
Yeah.
your story.
Yeah, for sure. I am one of those children of real estate agents. My mom got her license when I was in, I think, junior kindergarten. And I kind of grew up in the industry being, for lack of a better word, dragged around. And when I was
opening doors,
100% opening door, I was in charge of the map book in the back seat.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, before the days of GPS, but the turning point. So when I was 21, I went to the University of Toronto, came out of school, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And my mom said, why don't you get your real estate license? And I thought, I am super introverted. I'm shy. Like, this isn't what I wanted to do with my life, but it'll be like a holdover until I figure it out.
Right.
So I did that, got my license, and I sold real estate actively in Toronto for 15 years. So this like holdover period of my life turned into
for a couple of years,
15 years. Yeah. And so built a multi-7-figure, very lean team. And then in 2017, I had a bit of a midlife crisis, didn't really know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Kind of felt like, okay, I fell into this industry. I love it. But what do I want to do for the rest of my life? Ended up transitioning into training and coaching, built the listings lab we properly launched in 2018. And then that was it.
Love it. So
here we are.
What prompted, that go that direction, right? Make that pivot. And you see it a lot within the industry for sure.
Yeah.
And, I always joke, here in the States, it's the only thing easier than getting a real estate license is saying you're a coach.
100%. And actually, it's funny that you say that, because I know that I fall under the category of like, I'm in the coaching industry, but I don't consider myself a coach. I don't have calls with people and talk about the things that are holding them back and like, things like that. Like we are definitely not a typical coaching company. We are definitely like a strategy and training company. We are, we teach digital marketing strategy and business scaling strategy and things like that. We're definitely not like, come and get on a call with your coach, like, once a week for the next 12 months. And, we'll guide you through this process. That's not what we do. Because to be perfectly honest, I don't have that kind of patience. And the way that I built my real estate business was very different than what we see even today in like, your typical team. So the number one question that I used to get people knocking on my door when I was in my office was, can you help me? Can you help me? Can you tell me what you did? How are you doing this? And sorry, I have dogs that are
that's all right.
That have decided to go wild this morning.
Of course, always.
So I mean, that was the question that I was being asked all the time was, how are you doing this? I never see you doing all the typical things that people in real estate are told that they have to do in order to be successful. And I built my business very differently. So that's kind of how it started. When I first launched the Listings Lab, it was very much built around people who had watched me in the Toronto market. And as soon as I launched, I had a lot of people who didn't even care what we were teaching. It was, I need to know what you did. And if I can pay you for you to teach me to do what you did, I'm in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the initial build of the program was very much done that way. I definitely wasn't the typical like, oh, I'm over real estate, I want to start coaching because I think coaching is going to be easier. And I tell people all the time, this business has been way harder to scale, way
Yep.
harder to grow, and so much more expensive. Like my
Yes.
operating costs to run the listings lab are 15, 20 times my operating costs that I had to run a real estate team, and essentially to make the same amount of money.
Yeah.
So, it's definitely not something that I went into with rose-colored glasses, because I had a lot of friends and I knew a lot of people in the coaching industry, not in the real estate coaching industry, but in the coaching industry in general. And yeah, it was definitely like it was I want to be completely location independent. Like I want to have no ties to Toronto anymore.
Yeah.
I want to be able to move somewhere warm and to like completely rebuild my life somewhere else with my husband. And I feel like I never really, I was never meant to be a real estate agent. I got into the industry. I treated it like a game and like a puzzle. I feel like I got to a certain level of it, and like the next level, or the next part of the game was that I got to see like, how well do you really know how to do this? Can you do this for other people?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's usually how it kind of starts, right? You're
Yeah.
having success and people are curious, and we fall into that mentor role, and then we take somebody on, and then, somebody says, hey, maybe you should monetize this, and kind
Right.
of lead on that path. So Jess, you talked about doing things differently, team structure a little different. So while you were still in Toronto slinging real estate, what did the team structure dynamic, what did that look like?
So I'm moving. Just I have a sound
Hey,
booth.
they want your attention. That's all it is. They just want your attention.
No, they're wild animals. Yeah, you guys are bad. We're also in the process of moving, so things are everywhere, and they think that everything is just to play. I'm going into the booth because you guys are bad. They're also 8 months old, so both of them. Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna keep them quiet. Okay, so sorry about this. My husband is usually the one that's here to keep him quiet. When we go to the dentist, we have to go to Florida.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So he had to go to like an emergency dentist appointment in Florida.
So you get to babysit.
So I'm babysitting. And of course, the timing was just perfect. Okay, so my team structure was ultimately pretty different, because I did so 100% of what we did was generated online. I even in 2005, when I got my real estate license, I built my business on Facebook. So it wasn't your typical. I started at. I mean, you're in Texas. I started at a Keller Williams office, and was told, you got to door knock, you've got a cold call, you've got a flyer, you've got a billboard, you've got to do all of these things. And I remember the very first time I went door knocking, I came home and I cried, and I thought, if this is the way that I have to build this business, it's not for me.
Yeah.
And Facebook came out in February of 2004. And nobody was using it for business. And so I used to call it prospecting from my PJs. I would sit on my couch, like it was like an introvert's dream, right? Yeah. I like figured out how to essentially generate business from my couch through a screen.
Right.
And so that's how I initially built my business. As the business kind of changed and grew, the marketing obviously evolved. And then when I met my husband, his background was graphic design, marketing. We just kind of together started testing everything. And so from when we started collaborating, my business again kind of like went through another hockey stick. And so then from there, like the team structure, we were doing like several hundred deals a year, but we were doing it with 3 agents and an admin and a marketing person.
Yeah.
So I think that the way that we structured it was super efficient and really high volume per agent. And that was never, and again, we were always very tech heavy, even at a time when that wasn't really something that people were doing.
Right.
And so a lot of the structure of the team was very time efficient, but also extremely financially efficient, because I wasn't following the typical model of, okay, you hit bandwidth here, you hire a person, you hire
Right.
a person, you hire a person. Right. And so, we kept our team really lean, and everyone on our team made a lot of money, and everyone was very, very happy and stayed long-term. And we also didn't require them to do any of the typical stuff that everyone else was requiring of their agents.
How did you not succumb to, the environment, especially at the time, being at KW, the Red Book dropped around that time.
Yeah.
How did you not like completely go all in on the Kool-Aid while in that environment? Right. How did you avoid that?
I just really, so I don't know how much so I am a very risk tolerant person. I've done every test under the sun. And if there's one thing that I will do is I will move quickly. And it's something that I learned about myself So I never thought that this was the case when I was young. I was a people pleaser growing up. I was shy. But when I got into that environment, I took a DISC assessment. And KW was all about the DISC assessment.
Big time. Yeah.
100%, right? Yeah. And so I took a DISC assessment, and they told me that I would make like a really good administrator. And I remember thinking, like, that doesn't feel right.
Love it.
And I just sort of like, I just like decided that I was going to kind of ignore everything that everyone else was doing. My mom also built her business differently. So it wasn't one of those things that I had grown up watching someone do those things to be successful. So my mom had niched down really differently. She had niched down into medical professionals. And so I knew that the business didn't have to be done that way.
Right. What are all the ways?
What are all the ways that I can do this?
Yeah,
and so I've always been that person who is looking at other service industries and seeing how they're doing it and trying to figure out, will that work in real estate? And if it does, what does the framework of that actually look like? Because the typical real estate, I've become almost like the anti-typical real estate voice, because I did things so differently. And I don't think that we should be growing businesses the way that we did in 1985.
Yeah.
I just fundamentally don't think that it makes sense.
Right. Well, you were just ahead of the time, right? And you just went with the kind of, leaning into your strengths, which was probably at the time was just your intuition, which was just your gut.
I didn't know. I was like 21, 22 years old.
Yeah,
I didn't know what I didn't know.
And we understood early on too, the power of online, on-demand lead generation, because that was one of our key pillars. We were one of the first on the Tiger Leads platform when Howard Tager had Tiger Leads, and he limited it to 100. And then he obviously did what he did and built it and sold it. But that was our first take on it. And it was like more leads than we could get to. Like, what is going on here? Right.
Why isn't everybody doing this?
Why isn't everybody doing this?
Yeah.
And so, that for us, we had that proof. And I think for you, you probably had some proof early on with Facebook and starting to see, okay, there's something here.
Yeah.
And I can do what I want to do, like you said, in my PJs.
I had to figure out how to do it in a way that worked for me. And the way that I think that that model works really well for that high D, very very outgoing, very like life of the party type person. But I don't think that that's the only type of person who can be successful in this industry. And so for me, it became about, okay, how do I create a framework that looks and sounds and feels like me? And because what I started seeing is like, even my peers, people that I knew that got into the industry, they became this like real estate robot. They started like looking and sounding and dressing and driving and all of the things that looked like your quote unquote typical real estate agent. And it was like they lost the part of themselves that was them and that made them interesting and fun and different.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I'm shy and introverted and I'm supposed to play this like extroverted game for the rest of my life. That doesn't feel
authentic.
like I can do that for very long.
Well, it's not authentic, and what we know now, it's not sustainable from an energy standpoint, right? So, you look at that, and it's funny with the disc. I just look at the disc as an energy management tool, right? So, like if it says, well, you're wired to be an admin, it's like, well, all that is telling me is that if you have to do extroverted,
activities, right?
Then all I know you could go do it. You could probably do it well. I just know that you're going to need more time to recharge.
100%. Yeah.
And so,
and you're probably not going to love it.
You're not going to love it. Right. And I think what I love, what Lencioni has done with the 6 Working Genius, because that really shows the energy where you need to be spending your time and what's sustainable versus what is not, or what is gonna run out real fast. I love how he breaks down the coffee of the two that are predominant for you. It's like putting coffee into a thermos and putting the lid on it. It stays hot forever.
Mm-hmm.
And the middle two, it's like putting it into a coffee cup, and you may or may not put a lid on it, so it'll stay warm for a while. And then the last two that you need to avoid, you can do them, but it's like having a coffee cup that has a hole in it, and as you're pouring the coffee, it's just draining out. That's how fast your energy is going to be drained.
Yeah. So we use a very similar model, which is like your zone of genius, your zone of competence, your zone of incompetence. And so like we've always categorized it that way. But we use the Kolbe. I don't know if you've used the Kolbe before. We use the Kolbe for everything. I have people, several people on my team who've actually been Kolbe certified. And if we look at like my Kolbe, for instance, I am a 2 or a 3 in every category except quick start. So I'm a 10 quick start.
Yeah.
And so I'm very, very risk tolerant, and I can move fast.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's always served me really well. But I've always had to build systems around everything else to make sure, especially as a solopreneur, right? Yeah. Now I'm super lucky. I have a really great team that supports me in all the areas that aren't my zone of genius. But in those other areas, I had to learn how to be disciplined in those areas for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
just context, what you're saying there, the zone of genius is like that unique ability. It's what gives you energy.
Right. It's what you're good at.
What you're excellent at is
what you love.
Is the same thing, except for it doesn't give you energy.
Right.
Is unique ability and excellence. So
right.
And then get out of the competent activities, and definitely don't do any of the incompetent activities.
Right. And so the way that my Kolbe is built is I am like your typical visionary.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like ideas. I'm 50,000 feet in the air. I feel like I can see the future, but I had to be very disciplined in terms of like coming back down to earth and like building what needed to be built in order to get there. And so one of the things that like I learned very early on is that the tiny attention to detail wasn't something that I was really great at. And so almost immediately I I had to automate a lot of things so that the details didn't get forgotten.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I mean, back then we didn't have the technology that we have today.
Right.
And I
Right.
say all the time, like, if we had the tech and we had the tools that we have today, that, you know, I can't even imagine what we might have been able to build.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Who knows? Right. And so, you know, for you, you know, being able to take advantage of that and understanding your strengths and leaning in on your strengths, and it's such, you know, whatever you think of Gary Vee, you know, he talks about it all the time, right? You know, triple down on those strengths. And it's so true. You
Yeah.
lean in, and then you build the systems and resources and people around you to complement you to step in, especially with the Colby, right? With the 12 different quadrants, you know, you want a team that layers in so all the quadrants are covered. And it's so, man, once you kind of get that, and because our job as leaders is, you know, obviously lead by example, but have a vision, articulate the vision, but then we got to build the team.
We've got to build the team, and we've got to build the team. And I think that the other reason why people in real estate specifically struggle to maintain and build a team is because we're not good at hiring. We hire people who are like us. And the last thing that your business needs is
More people like
double
you.
your strengths and double your weaknesses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, you're leaving bigger holes if you hire people who
Yes.
are who are essentially like just amplifying the things that you're not good at. And so because of that, you know, the clarity around where I wasn't strong or the things that really drained me was really helpful in order for me to actually start to build out the support. And I failed building the team the first time. You know, the first administrator I ever hired stole $5,000 from me and took off, and I never heard from her again.
Yep.
Right? Like, I definitely I definitely made mistakes along the way, but I think because I'm risk averse and because I can move quickly, I didn't like get bogged down in that for months and then let it hold me back. I just was like, okay, well, that was obviously a fail, and like, let's figure out what went wrong, and let's move forward and fix it.
Yeah.
So I think like that's also something that has served me well. But again, I think it was the systems. It was being able to not pay a whole bunch of people $20, $30 an hour to do a job that a piece of tech can do for $500 a year.
Exactly. And I, you know, even now, and, you know, just want to kind of fast forward and, you know, talk about Listing Lab and definitely get your take on where you see kind of the direction of solopreneur team dynamic and leverage into the future. Yeah, I guess that's kind of the point there is, you know, with the team dynamic and really being able to build out the team. I think we have so many more options now, right? You know, one of the beautiful things that came out of the pandemic was the opening of the global workforce. And I think as real estate agents that move from, you know, the mindset of, oh, I'm self-employed.
Everything has to be in person, and I'm self-employed, and yeah.
Well, I'm self-employed, but the shift and really, you know, the whole, you know, gist of agent to CEO is that you got a lot of real estate agents, but they're operating in a self-employed mindset.
Right.
And they got to make the jump to business owner.
Yeah.
And then they have to start looking at, okay, this is not my personal piggy bank. Even if I'm building a lifestyle business, which most real estate agents do, but I still like, what's my profit? And I only have so many dollars to put the best team on the field. And so
that's one of the first things that we have to deal with people coming into our 7-figure agent program is your commissions do not equal your income.
Right. Yes, they have to understand, right? You're getting paid for what you do, and the profits is what the business is able to provide. And I think you know, understanding that is so key, Jess. And a lot of real estate agents, they're just not business savvy. They don't understand that. So I
think that to a certain extent, it's not always their fault, because what we find is if someone has owned a couple of businesses before they got into real estate, they tend to skyrocket very quickly because they set the business up like a business from day one.
Yes.
When we get a real estate license, doesn't matter where you go, doesn't matter where you get it from, you are essentially just taught how to not get sued.
Pretty much.
Nobody teaches you how to run a business. And
No.
so you get kind of like thrown into this industry of a whole bunch of people who are very, very opinionated people on there's, my way is the only way to do things. And it becomes very, very stressful and very confusing for a lot of people, especially if you don't have any kind of a business background. And the one of the main things that I had to learn early on was, okay, I can't just succumb to all of this noise. I have to figure out what's going to work for me, what's going to work for my strengths, and where am I going? Like, what do I actually want this to look like in a couple of years? And then it's the reverse engineer of that outcome that essentially gives you 100% of the clarity in terms of what needs to be worked on, what needs to be built, and in what time frame. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan wrote a book called 10 Times is Easier Than 2 Times. Such a great book, because I feel like without even really realizing it, those are the people who have like kind of that 10 times mindset, who tend to move very quickly and do very well, because anybody can hustle to 2 times, but you can't hustle to 10 times.
No.
And so it's a completely different way of thinking. And again, it's that agent to CEO thought process, right? The agent is thinking 2 times, the CEO is thinking 10 times. And it allows you to narrow down the options that you actually have.
Yeah.
There's a million shiny objects out there until you get really clear on what you want to build and how quickly you want to build it. And then the options become very narrow.
Yeah. I'm still pissed off about that book, because that's the first 2 years of Strategic Coach, which cost me $20,000 to get
I know. And then he just wrote the book and it was out there for $10. I know.
Right? Like, I paid $20,000 for all the information that I could get for $20. Come on.
I know.
No, Strategic Coach, that, who, not how concept really, I mean, that changed everything for me and led me into the Strategic Coach program. And so, that book, and then obviously my number one book recommendation is The Gap in the Gain.
I love The Gap in the Gain.
It's the number one concept that us as humans, we always deal with. And it's the fundamental concept to always go back to anytime we're feeling. Well,
what it does is it articulates the entrepreneurial mindset so well. It's that we're always chasing the next thing, and we're never satisfied and happy, and we never get to celebrate anything. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people who are naturally very entrepreneurial felt really seen when they read that book.
Yeah. Really
so Benjamin Hardy also has another book that he didn't write with Dan Sullivan, but is my number one recommendation, is Willpower Doesn't Work. And I absolutely love that book, because I think it pulls us out of the crushing it era. It pulls us out of this mindset of like, the people who work the hardest make the most money. And I think that that's the world that our parents grew up in.
Yeah.
And it was, you could have the American dream, the 2 cars and the house and the lake house and the, whatever, as long as you worked really hard. And the conditions, were like the world that we live in has changed so drastically that it's almost like the 80-20 has turned into the 95-5.
Yeah.
And especially in real estate, the barrier to entry is so low that I feel like that 95 has become really like the majority of people in the industry. And there's really only like 5% of agents who are really killing it. And maybe less, right? And so I might be being like generous with that 5%. And so in order to be that 5%, you have to think like that 5%. There's a book that a friend of mine sent to me called Steal Like an Artist. It's like a very, very quick book to read, but my number one takeaway from that book is don't emulate your heroes. And right. I think that there is this epidemic of copying in the real estate space, because a lot of people are not natural business leaders, business right. owners. There's a lot of copying. And instead of copying or instead of emulating your heroes, learn to think like them. Mm-hmm. And how do they think to come to that? How do they think? How do they make decisions? How do they kind of go about their day? What are the things that they focus and spend their time on? What are the things that they don't give time and energy to. And I would say the number one thing that I teach that shocks most people, because it's very different than the big red book, is that I don't teach to keep customer service longer than you have to. So the majority of the people who go through our higher level programs tend to not be in production anymore.
Yeah.
Because they're sitting in a visionary CEO role. They're not, and they get rid of customer service, which is the typical real estate team. Whenever we work with a typically built real estate team, it's usually the team leader that's still the rainmaker, that's still the person who is the top producer on their team, which is fundamentally, in my opinion, means that the business isn't built correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And most of the time though, they go down that path and they get themselves into it because it's, like I said, like a lifestyle business, and they're taking every dollar. And so that becomes a little harder to untangle.
100%.
But that's like you said, people that get in that already have that business mindset, right? Entrepreneur mindset that knows that they can't take all the dollars because there's no dollars to reinvest back for growth.
Well, the business money and the personal money are not the same thing.
They're completely different.
And so, what we ask all the time is like, how much do you pay yourself? And
all of it.
All of it. What do you mean? And so, the number one objection that we get whenever we're like, okay, it's time to make this move in your business, it's, well, I have to speak to my spouse. And it's like, well, is your spouse involved in your business? Is your spouse the operator of your business? Well, no. And I'm like, this is fundamentally why there is a problem in your business, because you are consulting someone about business decisions that knows nothing about your business. They're making the decision based off of, are you taking opportunity, food, vacations out of their mouth?
Yeah. The book that gave us the framework, and is, from Greg Crabtree's book, Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits. And he also, wrote a lot of the cash section in Vern's Scaling Up.
Yeah.
And really understanding that salary cap, formula, and we only have so many dollars to put the best team on the field. And, there's only a handful of business drivers, that can really have an impact on the growth of our business. And that's what I was saying earlier, one of the beautiful things that came out of the pandemic, opening up the global workforce, allowed us to tap into talent all over the world that allowed us to get in underneath the salary cap. And so, but that's just thing like you were just saying a while ago, man, what are all the ways, right? Like, I only have so many dollars. What are all the ways?
And I love that you just said that. So, I own 30% of a real estate agent virtual assistant business. And we scaled it right off of the pandemic. And, it has saved people. So, and honestly, I'll be honest too, like, some of the best talent that I have on my team lives overseas.
100%.
And the person who runs all of our back-end administration and operations lives in the Philippines. Yep. And our business, he's been with me for 5 years. Our business would not run without him.
100%. I mean, like, that's, and I think for a lot of us in the real estate space, prior to, right, we had that experience, and it was just like, dang, right. But understanding how those business models were set up, they were just a little bit different, right? You were given half to the company, and then you were given half, they were given half to the team member. So you think you were getting somebody at what you were paying, but it was actually half, right?
Yeah, no, we're set up really differently. We pay our virtual assistants very well.
Yeah.
And I'll say this honestly, like, our VAs that we have, we don't even call them VAs.
No, they're team members. They're another
we don't call them VAs, but they're paid very well. Like, we pay them as though they're in North America, and they live a great life.
Yeah.
So,
it's, you take care of the people, right? That are taking
and they take absolutely phenomenal care of us. But again, it's allowed us to go to Eastern Europe and go to the Philippines and go to the places where, we didn't have access the same way, or it's not that we didn't have access, it's that people didn't think of them as options before. And so the talent level that we have access to now is so much higher. You're not just looking at someone local who can come into the office and move the paper around.
Right.
So that's been game changing, but also the tech savviness of people from all over the world has also been an incredible boost in people's efficiency, because we're hiring people who are incredibly good at building automation and incredibly good at building from a tech side and connecting things so that people really have the ability to run with I would almost say like all of the opportunity that exists now, as opposed to just what is like in people's know-how. So as an example, we have automated for the people who are in our 7-figure programs, we have automated everything from contract to close. There is no human interaction in the contract to close system. It is 100% automated, 100% built out. Nobody has to touch it. And so there's a lot of people in our programs who are paying $300-$400 per transaction when they come in to have that facilitated. Now, if somebody's doing 100 deals a year, that $300 or $400 a transaction really adds up. And then that money becomes available to reinvest back into somewhere else. And so it's not really just about the time efficiency. And yes, we do focus a lot on the time efficiency, but I truly believe that the average team leader or the average person who is really sitting in that CEO role of a real estate team / organization can do that from anywhere in the world, working 3 to 4 hours a day max, and can be making multi-7 figures a year in profit. Yeah. If the business is set up correctly.
Is that where you're excited about where things are at and where things are going into the future? Like, what do you see, like, either, I don't even know if it's a fulfilling question, maybe so, the direction of really where, I think it has to be a combination, like you said, right? Lifestyle, freedom, because that's the real goal, right?
Well, when people get into real estate, I've always said for 3 reasons, right? Unlimited income potential, being able to set their own schedule, which for a lot of people turns out to be a myth, and being a people person and wanting to help people. Yeah. And the average solo agent never actually gets to accomplish those things.
Never.
And so the things that I'm really excited about is, and I think that a lot of the time, the things that I talk about and the things that I tend to focus on are very strategy and, very like structural and things like that. But the reason or the motivation behind it is very different. Many, many years ago, I read a book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And it absolutely changed the way that I think about business, and it changed the way that I think about real estate, because it's written by a hospice nurse, and then it goes through the number one regret that people have at the end of their lives. And it's always that they work too much and that they didn't spend enough time doing the things that they loved with their family and their friends and, essentially living. And I felt that deeply, because I think that this entire industry is built around, you get into real estate for one reason, you get disenchanted the first 2 years and jaded, and then you realize, that you're like, okay, well, in order to make $250,000 a year, I have to work 12 hours a day for the rest of my life. And I think that is fundamentally wrong. And with some tweaks and some business structure, you get to have both. You can have the freedom of, you get to do what you want, when you want, where you want, with who you want. And you also get to not have those regrets. Yeah. And I think that for me, that's why I built everything the way that I built it. I'm selling something that is harder to sell, because a lot of people in real estate don't think that it's possible. So I'm fighting against the belief shift and the scarcity of like the typical solo real estate agent. Yeah. And so I definitely didn't choose from a business standpoint the easiest sale to make. The easiest sale to make is to teach someone or to hold somebody's hand and you know, I mean, if I wanted to make the easiest sale, I'd probably just own an agency.
Yeah.
But it's not fundamentally what I think is going to feed me and what's going to do the best for the most number of people. And I think that there's a lot of people in this industry that are going to be quite unhappy at the end because of not structuring things the way that it could be.
Yeah, and I think, you know, what we've talked about is identifying, you know, who you are and what are your strengths. And like the example with your mom, like who are you best equipped to serve, and building it around that, right? Building it around your strengths.
And who do you like? Like, who do you want to work with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jess, you're amazing. I knew today was going to be a very, let's dive in deep into the deep end conversation. And so I really appreciate you carving out the time, jumping in.
Thanks for having me.
Bringing all the knowledge. Give a little context, share a little information, how people can connect with you. We have the listing lab. We also books. We have tons of access.
I mean,
get connected.
I mean, I wrote a book called More Money, Less Hustle, Becoming the Seven-Figure Real Estate Agent. It's available on Amazon. So that's one option. I would say the other option is just my name at Jess Lenouvel on Instagram, or really on any platform. You can find me.
It's good stuff. Jess, awesome. And I know we'll have to definitely do it again.
You let me know. I'm available for you.
Awesome. I appreciate you. You guys make sure get connected with Jess. Give her lots of love. And we'll see you guys on the next show. See ya.